Hey there, and welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. My name is Mark, and I go by Mark Your Pages.
I'm Jess or Jessie Corinne, and I low-key feel like I've forgotten how to do this because it's been such a while since we recorded an episode, but season 2 is here and I'm so excited.
It is really incredible to think that we made it through an entire year consistently doing good stuff. You and I had some fantastic chats over the break. Not that it was much of a break, but a little bit of a break of things that we want to do this year. And it's been so cool. And I'm so excited to kick off season 2. So this is going to be incredible because I don't know about you, Jess, but I've gotten a lot of DMs and messages and seen some really cool and exciting new accounts coming out as they're getting started in their planners and their bullet journals. And I'm really excited to see what some of these new crew are doing this year.
No, I would very much agree. I love new planner season because I feel like everybody comes out of the woodwork and is sharing all of their new setups and stuff. And it's very exciting to see all of the ideas that other people have. And I'm so looking forward to seeing them grow across the year, seeing what they have to offer and all of that, whether it's like YouTube or Instagram or anything like that. But what are we going to be chatting about today?
Ooh, well, it's a very good topic, I think, especially if you are starting in a new journal, if you're starting a new planner, even if you are an old school planner and journaler, you might be rethinking things a little bit. And one things we don't want to see this year, and one thing we want to help you out with on today's podcast is talking about ways in which you can keep your planners, your journals consistent throughout the years. And Jess and I have some tips, some tricks, and ways that we've approached it over the past few years. I know for myself, this will be my 7th, I think, year of bullet journaling and keeping my bullet journal. And there's been a number of things that I've done throughout the years that have kept me on track, especially when I haven't been totally feeling it. So I'll be sharing some of those. But Jess, let's go ahead and start with you because I know you and I have been planning for about the same time, at least from bullet journaling standpoint. I think you've mentioned that you've used like classic planners and teacher planners and things like that in the past. But why don't you go ahead with your first tip or trick for the Planner Pals?
So one of my biggest tips, and thus I'm going to start off with that, is that if there is one part of your system that isn't working, that does not mean you have to throw away the entire system. I have very much previously had it where, coming into the new year, just getting kind of excited about the prospect of all of these new things that you could add into your lineup, whether it be like a new journal or a new layout you're trying, or just like some part of your system that you've tweaked or changed, something that you've added new. If it's not working out, that's okay, but it doesn't mean you have to get rid of everything. One of the ones that I can have like from a personal kind of experience was one year I did try using a teacher planner. I was finding that I wasn't having a very good separation of like home life and work life. So I thought that by having a teacher planner, I could kind of pull everything teaching related out of my bullet journal, put it into there, and hopefully that would help me get that separation. It did in one respect. I kept the teacher planner at school, meant that all of my work stuff was there, but it didn't necessarily align with how I was actually working on my teaching related stuff. I was still doing teaching related stuff at home, and then I didn't have my planner there to help me. I also found that in pulling all of my teacher stuff out of my bullet journal, it made me not want to use my bullet journal anymore because then the only things that were left behind were chores. I'm not very good at chores.
That could be a little problematic. And I think that's very interesting. That's how I felt about pre-made planners before. Dated, undated, whatever that might be. I think the ones that have like all the really exciting things on the pages, including your task and your notes, but like the check-ins, the habit trackers, and kind of all of those things, you feel kind of confined. And I definitely understand for those who like those. This isn't a knock on those type of planners at all. People who love them die for them. But one thing, especially with a lot of those, at least for people who've been doing it for a long time, you see people start to customize it, whether it's getting like new sticker labels or even whole like sections I've seen recently where people are like, well, I don't really use that section of this planner. I like everything else. And either they've custom made a new section, or I know a lot of planner creators make their own kind of like inserts or cover-ups, I'll call them, where people are just taking stickers and essentially covering the sections they don't want to use and making it something that they do. So to that point, is very much just because it comes wrapped up in that packaging, it doesn't mean that you can't change it and use it for something else.
Exactly. Just because like either you have given it a header or the pre-printed planner came with a header that says it is XYZ of a thing does not mean you have to use it in that way at all. So if you find that a couple weeks into a certain layout or whatnot, especially if it's an annual layout, but a couple weeks in, this isn't really working for me. How could we tweak it? How could we change it? How could we adjust the way we use that layout so that it still gets use? And it is, of course, course okay if you decide, you know what, it wasn't for me and I'm just going to leave it there and not touch it. That's also a way forward.
Yeah, something that has been helping me recently, and this was very difficult for me to do. I have a lot of planners, dated planners that I hadn't used all the way or used partially, and I felt like they were going to be such a waste. But let me tell you, this fountain pen ink community, they know how to reuse things. And I saw so many people that are using, whether it's like their Hobonichis or other dated planners and things that they didn't use as like ink swatches. And at first I was like, no, 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 we can't do this. There's a days of the week and dates on here. Like this has nothing to do with what you're doing on here. And recently I've been doing that. And it's like this very fun, kind of freeing moment where you're just like, I don't care what's on this page. I'm using it for this instead, and just kind of making it your own. And I really love the way it works. It's taken me a while to get here, though, just accepting the fact that I can change it. It's okay if it's not being used exactly what it's here for. I do like something about this, maybe not everything. So I'm just going to have fun with it anyway.
Yeah, for instance, like you could take your future log, and if you're a couple weeks in, it's like, I'm not using a future log. I've got an Outlook calendar or a Google calendar or whatever. If there's something else that you're using for that function already, then change it. You could have it as a birthdays and anniversaries log. It could become a memory keeper. It could be like, I don't know, a little monthly reflection space or something like that. Especially if you haven't put the words future log on it, there are a lot of things you can do. Otherwise, just stick something over it. It could be something else.
Absolutely, 100%.
What would be your tip for the Planner Pals in terms of consistency in your journals this year?
Yeah, so I just did the math on my fingers while you were talking for a second. I've been bullet journaling for 8 years this year in 2025. Just to be very clear. Just to be very clear on that, because the tip and the thing I'm going to talk about here is what's actually held me into doing this for as long as I have is just making it a part of your day at some point. So for myself, I use my bullet journal for work. That was the original reason that I started bullet journaling, was to keep my work life together. Task, emails, notes, all the types of different things. So for me, I have to use it because it's literally how I get work done. But early on, while I did this, I was trying to do all of the things, too many of the things, and put it all inside of there. And certain times you kind of get overwhelmed. And especially early on, when you just start, you don't always think about opening up your planner or your journal every day to look in it, to work out of it, because it's new to you. It's not familiar. Now I don't come downstairs and sit down. I honestly don't travel around my house often without my bullet journal in case I need to write something down or do something. But it's just a part of my day. I open it up. I take a look at what I've done previously. What happened yesterday? What did I accomplish? What do I need to write down today? And kind of refresh myself. And I do that several times a day. One, as I'm working through the task and notes, but also I kind of give myself a morning review, an afternoon review, like after lunch, and I step away from my desk and do anything I need to do, like eat food, and then come back. It's like, okay, I'm going to look at this again, just refresh on where I am, what I'm working on next. And then at the end of the day, I also just review through it just as a way for me to kind of close anything out that I have done that I didn't mark done, and to think a little bit ahead for tomorrow, and usually take a look at like my calendar or what else is going on. I do a similar thing with my Outlook email box as well. I kind of follow a similar flow to that too. So that's something that I think is important to do for yourself. Now, if you don't use your bullet journal for work, that's absolutely fine. You can do a handful of things that I think can help you get that day-to-day touch, which is helpful. One of those things is just opening up your notebook, like I said, in the morning and taking a look at what's going on, whether you keep your tasks or notes digitally or elsewhere. I think it's really good to do. A lot of people also actually journal inside of their journals, especially if you're not keeping a bullet journal or using it as a planner, picking a time during the day to sit down and kind of write things out, whether it's intentions or reflections or whatever it is you might be copying down. It's just really important for yourself just to make sure you make it part of your habit.
Yeah, I think that this idea of routinizing your use of your journal can be really powerful. And when you're just starting out, that can be kind of tricky. So I like your point about having those kind of set check-in points for yourself. If you kind of build that into your daily routine or like established routine, that can be quite helpful. So it's like, if there's a certain thing that you do at the start of every day, how can you like tack on your journal use to that? Like, when I sit down at my desk and turn on my computer or whatnot, while it's loading up, I will check in with my journal or something like that. In my system, I do try and make sure I check in at least in the morning and in the evening. But as another thing, I keep my journal where I do the primary kind of basis of my work, so it is always there. And I also find that if I keep it open whenever possible, I'm much more likely to touch in with it every single day. If I keep it closed, then it's like, oh God, barrier to entry. Have to open my notebook. What a struggle. But seriously, like that will limit me using it.
It is. I was going to say, as an add on to that, is definitely put it in the place where you're working. Like you just said, have it open so you kind of have to look at it. A lot of the times at the end of the day, I open up my notebook, I put it right in front of my keyboard before I get up from my desk and leave. And now, again, I work remote, so like I can do that because this is work. But if you're the type of person that goes into an office, again, maybe that's just part of your daily ritual, where you take out your computer, you hook it up, you take out your journal, you open it up, you take out your writing utensil, whatever you're kind of getting yourself together, and then just sitting down with it and just saying, okay, let's take a look at this first. And just having it there. Again, whether you're using it all day, every day, whatever that might look like for you, it's going to be different. I also don't want to scare anyone away that is like, wait a second, I have to literally keep my face in my notebook all day long. How would I get anything done? No, that's not reality. No one's necessarily doing that. But I think making a part, like you said, of your routine, how you're using it, finding a good flow is important. The most important thing, like I said, is just having at least one touch point a day if you can to be able to keep it in your daily flow.
Yeah, and I think that, obviously we also have other kind of like larger timescale touch points as well, like, the weekly setup and the monthly setup and stuff like that. But if those are the only times you're checking in with your journal, then probably the way you've kind of organized the information in there needs to be taking account of that. Like if you want to keep your journals and planners as things that are helping you organize your daily life, then having daily touch points with them is really important. If it's not so much for that purpose, then maybe daily isn't really the need, but just kind of structuring it around the way you intend to use the journal or how you're going to be getting things done with it, if that kind of makes sense.
That's a very good tip you got there, Jess. All right, what's next for you? What's the next idea on keeping consistency inside of your planners and journals?
This is one that I have fallen victim to so many times, and I find that every single time I notice it, it's like, oh, this is why everything's so hard to keep up with. And that is duplicating information or having the same information stored in different places, usually in different ways as well. So, for instance, if we take the example of the future log or any kind of like, year-long calendar or whatever, I have an Outlook calendar. I can rely on my Outlook calendar being up to date because I take my phone out with me, I make plans with people, I put it straight on in there. I don't necessarily need to then duplicate that information into my journals because that's not going to be the place that I think to check for that information. But then I'm adding to this like time taken in terms of doing my journaling practice by making myself write it in there, if that kind of makes sense. Despite saying this, I still keep a future log. It's just that I have stripped it well away back. Like instead of doing the full kind of like spread of different sections for the different months and having, highlighted lines or whatever for those, if this is your structure, I'm not calling you out. Your journal is yours, not mine, but it doesn't work for me. So instead what I do is that because I know my journal is only going to last me 6 months, it's literally a page divided into 2 sections, one for quarter 1, one for quarter 2. Or in the second half of the year 3 and 4. I have a very simple structure, didn't take me a long time to set up, and thus I don't feel as much pressure to use it or to put information in there, which means that I'm kind of like limiting my, I'm not going to say ability to duplicate information because I can definitely duplicate it if I felt so inclined, but I'm not inclined to do it because I feel like I didn't like waste the page if it doesn't get used, if that kind of makes sense.
It does. I have plenty of pages that I go through week by week, especially as I was just doing a flip through video kind of on the end of 2024. And there are a few pages in there that were not very well used. And I felt wasteful, or I thought to myself at first, like, did I not do this the right way? And then I just kind of realized, like, that's just how some weeks are. And you make a really good point about how you're keeping things and writing it down. Now, you talked about not duplicating. And for me personally, I find that duplication to be helpful in a way. And what I mean by that is just when I set up my weekly, I put a lot of things in my calendar as well, my digital calendar, because for me, I kind of work a little bit backwards, where if someone tells me something, if I don't put it in there right away, I will not remember it. And if I write it down inside of my journal, there might be a good chance that I don't remember to put it in there too. Even though I am looking at it and reviewing through it, it's just one of those things where in my mind, for me to truly know where it is, it has to be in a digital format, because I'm not always with my bullet journal as I'm out and about, even here at home. If I keep it down here and I'm not taking it upstairs to do something inside of it, and someone asks me a question about a date, I cannot remember. Like, I know that I can. It's not a strength of mine. So writing it in there is not it for me. But I do that though, because when I am working and kind of in a flow state, I will refer to that. My future log looks different than it has historically. Last year, it looked similar, and I've refined it this year. But this year, I have kind of a calendar future log because for my work, I need to have that. I found I really like that calendar view of it. But a lot of the times I am duplicating, but for me, it's because it really helps solidify it a little bit. Remember, Mark, this is when you're going into the office. I have it on my work calendar. I have it in my bullet journal. I know that. I have it highlighted. I've done all the good things that I'm supposed to do. But digitally for me is definitely a really good way. So, but I think it is important though, on your point though, about this duplication part and making sure that you're not duplicating, is just make sure that if you are rewriting it, that you're just kind of rewriting what's important and not like all of the details if it's unnecessary. Like use it almost as like a reminder, not the hard facts golden source, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get you. And I think that's a good point also, like duplication with purpose. Like you said, that is part of your process for being able to remember things, being able to get things done, all of that kind of stuff. If you're finding that the duplication is kind of like integral to you using your journals and planners in a way that you want to, go forth. 100%. You know, all of these ideas are just ideas. I just find that from my system, when I duplicate, usually it is done without that kind of intentionality, without that kind of purpose behind it. It's a, oh, I need to fill in this layout kind of a thing. And then, depending on how many places I'm duplicating it in, I then have to remember to go and update all of those places. So it's like, okay, well, I've checked this off my task list on the weekly and on the daily and on the monthly. Oh, I should also go check in my future log, and I should probably also go and check in with my like future me problems because it's probably there. So, you know, if you're finding it to be a burdensome thing, if you're finding it to make like your journaling practice not enjoyable, then maybe duplication is an issue. But if it's part of the like integral way that you are getting things done, keep going. Duplicate all the information. Go forth and do it. Alrighty, Mark, what would be your second tip for people? Or we're probably up to like the 16th tip now. It's little tips sprinkled in, but next major tip.
Hey, the planner pals love it when we do this. So for me, it is definitely using things that I enjoy inside of my journal. There's a lot of different brands out there, especially around pens and fountain pens and inks, that talk about loving your writing and then therefore loving to use a journal and do that. So for me, I would say probably over the past 2 years or so, fountain pens have become a really integral part to who I am as a person. I bleed fountain pen ink now. But my favorite part about this is like finding pens that are really cool. So like, I have this pen of the week for this week here. This is called Big Sur. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah. Everything about it. Using this pen brings me a lot of happiness and joy, and therefore I enjoy writing with it. I have a really cool ink color in here that has a lot of shading. So as I'm writing with it, the colors look really cool on the page. And when I'm done and I step back and I look at it, like I'm really proud of the way it looks. All I'm doing is writing normally. I'm not doing anything fancy, but I've really enjoyed that. But I've always found, regardless if that's a fountain pen, I also have like the Uniball Signo DX, which is like my favorite gel pen. Also the Mark-On pens from Sarasa. Like these two make me happy too, but for very different reasons. I just know that I can trust them. They're always consistent. I like the way they look on the page. I like the way my handwriting looks when I use them. And that really makes me happy to write inside of my journal. I'll also say other types of stationery can do that for you as well. Stamps are definitely a big one for me. I love like when I create a page and I'm using the stamps and everything looks so nice and clean, and it looks almost like it's printed. Sometimes I feel really good about myself when I do that. I'm like, yeah, you're getting good at this, Mark. But it just makes me feel good, and it makes me want to use the journal. Versus if you have a pen that you don't like, or even speaking of journals and paper is a big part of that too. Like if you don't like the paper that's in your journal and it makes you mad all the time, we've talked about like the ghosting and stuff like that has happened. It doesn't make me want to use it any more than I have to, because it just makes me angry. So finding things that you really love to use inside of your planners and your journals, I think just ups the ante for you. That makes you want to write, makes you want to work inside of your journal, and therefore use it consistently. Do you have any pens or anything like that, Jess, that you like love?
Oh, I I love this question because I've actually been thinking about it recently. Because for the longest time, my favorite pen, my pride and joy, was the Papermate Inkjoy pen, and I think it's been dethroned now. And my actual new favorite pen is the Zebra Sarasa Markon.
It's so good, isn't it?
It's so good, but especially because I swear that Artronov is gaslighting me, and I will die on this hill. But I swear that their new paper is coated just a little bit, because things are taking way longer to dry, and this pen has saved me, as opposed to my baby, my inky boy. But he's a little bit too inky now, so the Papermate Inkjoy is being reserved for other types of paper, not my journal.
So conspiracy theory, we think that our Trinalia paper is coated now?
Yeah, that's it. I think not a lot, just a little. Long enough to make my microns smudgy and me have to change my favorite pen. So I don't know. They keep telling me it's not, but I don't believe yeah, it's like full blown conspiracy mode over here. I'm like, they tell me that it's not, but I can't. The facts don't match up. The math ain't mathin'.
Maybe that's what they did. They changed it before they started putting out more fountain pen ink and pens, because they're like, look, if our other paper ain't gonna hold up, we gotta do something with it.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, with the move to more inks and fountain pens, maybe that was one of the process kind of pieces on that. But I've found that with their newer journals in particular, things do get a bit more smudgy, which is unfortunate because, you get into your patterns with the things you like to use and stuff, and then people go changing things, and then you have to change your preferences. I hate that. Like this lady on her porch, just being like, get off my lawn, everything's changing, you whippersnappers with your MP3s and your Toctics.
It's funny that you said I was doing something the other day and something smeared a little bit, and I was almost like, oh, sorry. I apologized to my journal. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean to work that fast, and it was something that I've used before. So now you got me thinking, like, maybe it wasn't a me problem. Maybe something did happen. Interesting.
Yeah. It's not us. It's them. Them, the journals.
Them, the journals. Oh my gosh. This is going to start a big kerfuffle. We'll never be invited back, Jess.
Yeah, they're like, sorry, you can't be part of the team. You can't sit with us anymore. Oh. But no, I do think that what you're saying about, making your journaling a more enjoyable experience is going to make you more likely to stick with it. I remember getting my first, and I know this is going to sound silly now because we've talked about it previously, that this journal is no longer for us. Getting my first LT 1917 was like, open the box, like the lights coming out, like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I'm gonna put so many great plans in here. And I look back on that journal, I'm like, oh girl, you think that your handwriting was great, but no. But still, it was such an exciting moment because it felt so special, and it was nice to go in and be creative and put my plans in there. And I'm so glad that I started it, but I'm also so glad that I stopped using their notebooks.
Yeah, we've talked about it so much, and if people are just finding the podcast now, just to fill you in, Loistrom notebooks, they ghost. And then if you're not a fan of ghosting, and what we mean by that is seeing your writing on the other side of the page, then they're not for you.
It's not the business. I mean, like, in certain instances, if it's just black pen on paper, sure, but that's not how I do my journaling primarily, so it's not really for me. But by using those supplies that felt a little bit more elevated, it felt like, oh, I'm an adult now, I have an adult notebook kind of a thing. And nowadays I've got, like, my kind of composition printed. I'm like, oh, I'm a middle grader, I'm a middle school student now. But it's nice to use, and it makes the process more enjoyable, so I'm more likely to stick with it.
You know what, you make a good point there. I talked about pens and things inside of it, but actually the outside of the notebook too is just as enjoyable of a situation to like really want to sit down and use it too. If it's something that you don't absolutely love or even want to look at, that's a problem within its own self.
Yeah, there are definitely some journals that I have in my stash that are 100% designated to just be R&D journals because the color is like blah. Like, yeah, I'm not going to be putting my official daily plans in there. They deserve better than that color.
It's so funny how I'm the same exact way with mine, just having the collection that I have, that we have. It's not a co-owned one, but we have our own lofty collection. So I know exactly what you mean when you're just like going through and you're looking through and you're just like, this is it. When I did the video with my brother that I posted right before the new year, I was going through all the different notebooks that I had to find the one that I felt okay with giving to him. And on the back of that box, it actually said like next bullet journal or new bullet journal on the back. And it was the old like blue linen one with the falling star, because it's funny, at that moment that was like the coolest notebook that I had, right? It was just like, this is it. You're going to always have the coolest notebook. And then it's just funny that by the time I got to even potentially even think about using that, I obviously had something else that I liked a lot more. So it's always just funny too how that is, but it is every time I buy a new notebook, I'm like, this is the next one. This is what's up. Like, this is going to be it. And then, you wait 6 months or depending how long it's been between when you started and you end your journal, there's probably somebody new in your life that you're just like, and you are next.
This is literally what happens anytime Archer and Olive does their like first release of the year. I'm like, ooh, gorgeous. Like, I know we just started in our new notebooks, but like, this is the one. This is gonna be it. I get to the end of the year and I'm just like, nah. Do something else instead.
I'm telling you, this next year, I mean, I'm using my marked one because I felt like I had to use it since I, made it this past year. I'm going to chip into the Halloween collection, I think, as my next one. I've been holding on to those for so long. It might even be the old classic ones. I don't know. It might be the Blood Moon one we just got. I just know that my next one, I have to use it because every single year for the past few years, I'm always buying out the collections for Halloween with the full intention of using one of those notebooks because they all look so cool. And then it's just like something else happens where I'm like, no, or it's not special enough yet, or I don't quite know. But I think it just goes to show you that, the outside of your notebook, what it is just as important as what you're putting inside sometimes.
I love your point about like carefully selecting the one that Joey could use because I was just like, yeah, I did exactly the same thing for Vogel. I'm like, oh no, he can't use the dragon. He can't use the bats. Or maybe the wand. Okay, the potions kind of a thing. And he comes in, he's like, can I use the dragon? I'm like, get your grubby mitts off of my dragon. You're not having it.
So funny. Those are the exact same ones, Jess, that I was thinking about using. I think I'm using the wand one next. I have been doing the same things. My wife's cousins, I saw them over at Thanksgiving, and they think it's very cool, like that I have all this collection stuff and everything else. And I was like, I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm just never going to use if you want it. They were like, what? And so I've been going through my catalog and I'm trying to pick and choose like which ones I think are right. And I'm even being selective for them. I was like, no, like, I don't think you're really going to like this one. I've got better ones than that for you. And just being like, but it's fun to do though, to like go through that and pick and choose and revisit the collection every now and again. Cause you find some things.
And it's nice to let the journals live out their destiny because I know that there are some journals in my collection that if they're not going to be R&D journals, then they're probably not going to be ones I use. But when I have a friend come over and go, oh, I was thinking about starting a journal for XYZ, I'm like, oh, well, let me show you a notebook that I've got that has your name on it, kind of a thing. But it is nice to be able to share the joy.
It is. It's a special thing. It's like people that are really good at gift giving. Like we're really good at notebook giving. We're like, here's a notebook that we think that represents you best. This is my gift to you.
Oh, I love the idea of like, this is the one that represents you best. It's like, if I kind of think about the journals in my collection now, I kind of want to go through and be like, okay, like who do you remind me of? Who do you remind me of? Not that I'm going to give them all away because still got to have my notebook rainbow. But still.
Who was the person back in the day on YouTube? She used to name her bullet journals.
We had a few. Caitlin Marie de Silva did, and then a couple other people started to. Because I think Elizabeth Plant Lace Bride had a little bit that she was doing naming as well. But Caitlin used to name all of her starting with H.
Oh, is that? I never realized that common thread. I just remember her naming them, and I thought that it was so funny and like very cool. But that's what it reminded me of. Like when you're like, this reminds me of this person. I'm calling this one the Elizabeth, or something stupid like that.
That's kind of cute, though.
Well, speaking of gifting, Jess, can you gift our planner pals who are either just getting started with their bullet journals or planners the next little tidbit of information that's going to help them stay consistent?
Yeah, you laughed through that because you knew how cheesy that segue was. So good. So I would say that my next tip would have to be that it's just okay to make changes as you go. Like we kind of touched on with the first point, if you're finding that there's a layout that you're using that, or rather isn't getting used at all, you can just tweak it. You can change it to be something else. You could cover it over with a full page sticker and ignore it completely. That is also a change that is viable. There are parts of my system, for instance, this year that I have already had to change on the, 9th of January, as we're sitting here recording this, at least 9th for me. But one of the things I was trying this year, or am still trying, hopefully, by the time you see this, is that I'm doing a life admin gamification system where effectively I'm taking all of the areas of my life that aren't my work and I'm assigning all of the tasks that I want to do more of or do repeatedly a point value. So by doing these things, by completing these things successfully, I earn points for myself. As I get points, I level up. As I level up, I get rewards. That's the general gist of it. But I knew going in that I was, one, not going to have a complete task list. There were going to be things that I forgot. And two, I was not going to have assigned points as accurately as I probably should have. Because there are some things that I have oddly previously found quite difficult to get myself to do. But now, as I'm gamifying my life, they're actually happening on a much more regular basis, which is quite exciting. Hopefully, I maintain that. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. But because these aren't necessarily things that I could predict in advance that were going to be needed, or things that I kind of, thought were going to be one way and turned out to be another way, I've just been making changes as I go. Now, notably, the tracking of this system is on Excel, so it's a little bit easier to make updates and not be like, oh, I have to completely start a new planner or anything like that. But there are some things that I've written down in my journal already that are related to that system that do need changing. So for some of them, I just kind of held off on filling them in until I found my feet with them. For other ones, I'm going to be getting out my white sticker labels and sticking up all over them to kind of like fix mistakes, quote, quote. They're not mistakes. I thought they were the right thing. They're just not the right thing anymore.
I think it's a very cool concept. I've watched two of your videos where you've talked about it. One with creating it, and you did another follow up in December that talked a little bit more in depth and detail. And I think it's so cool. It reminds me a bit of like Dungeons and Dragons kind of esque when you're like building the story around yourself and doing that. I personally will not be gamifying my life in that way, but I actually really enjoy watching you do it, because for me, I would want someone else to kind of do it to give me a surprise or a prize or a something, and I'm just not going to pick that well for myself, I know, but I'd be like, I want someone else to give me a reward if I do this all the way. I always get a lot more like validation out of that if someone else is doing it for me versus me doing it. But you make some really good points in there, and that's a really good example. I think that if you are not gamifying your life and just using a regular planner or journal to this point, though, just know that it is absolutely okay to change it, because it's kind of what we talked about in the very beginning, is that if you're not enjoying using it, there's something that's just kind of stopping you all the time, that eventually will just pick and pick and pick and pick at you until one day you just like throw it across the room or throw it in the trash, and you're just like, no more of this. I want no more. And you never open it up again or use it. It just, you have to be able to be flexible with yourself, not just the journal, but flexible with yourself enough to know and really think about it too. It's actually a good point that we've talked about, I think previously. I know I've talked about it in these videos about doing these like monthly or quarterly recaps and revising and rereading your journal to find out what's working, what's not, and like what needs to change. Essentially a bullet journal retro, for a lack of better term. That is really important. It's just a part of that mindfulness, not just jotting down your feelings and your thoughts and whatever else, but really making sure this is actually working for you, and having enough commitment and passion and permission, I think, from yourself more than anything, to make that change, to make it work.
It doesn't happen often. We don't see it happen very often, where people like set up their full journal or like the start of journal stuff and they go, you know what? I hate it. I don't want it. I don't want to use it. I think we don't hear about it because people almost feel like maybe like a sense of shame, like, oh gosh, I'm like, waste this notebook or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but like, stuff it. Waste the notebook. Don't waste your year. If you're not going to get the things done that you wanted to do with this notebook because you don't like the way you set it up, then you have my permission and hopefully your own person's permission to just start again. Just make a new one. It's fine. Like, it's paper. Yes, they are not necessarily cheap, and there is some kind of like financial aspect of that, but you can also do things in the same notebook. You just section off that part and go like, haha, trial run, take two, let's go again. There are still ways that we can still make that journal used, even if it's not necessarily with the initial setup that we started with.
I had someone reach out to me on Instagram that basically said that. They were like, we are 8 days into the year and I already think I need a different planner approach. And I was just like, oh my goodness, first of all, like that's really soon, but also it's okay. Like this is a great time to figure out something's not working for you. I usually tend to give myself at least 2 weeks to really like get to know something a bit more, especially when I do like notebook reviews and things like that. I like to actually spend time with it, because doing something for one day is not going to change your life. Honestly, doing something for a week, maybe. I mean, I can force myself not to do something for a week easily. It takes a little bit longer for myself personally, like turn that into an actual habit or something that I am or am not doing. I just know that about myself, though. Maybe other people just self realize and actualize a lot faster than I do.
But I guess this kind of comes back to the first point of like, if something isn't working, if part of it's not working, we can make tweaks and we can make changes, kind of thing. We don't have to throw out the whole system because of one part. So it's this kind of balancing act of like, how long do we give it so that we kind of have more of a sense of whether it is or isn't working, and thus do we want to change it or do we want to scrap it and move on to something else entirely? Like, making changes, I like changing things in my journal in general. I like running these little experiments with myself, and I like your point about giving yourself time to figure out if it actually works for you. Because, like you said, if you try something for one day and you're like, oh, well, this didn't work, I'm like, okay, was it the system or was it the day or was it the fact that it's new and you're still a learner? And we're allowed to be learners. We're allowed to take time to get used to new systems and such. But once you know that something's not working, once you're like, yeah, okay, I gave it the good college try, it's fine to let it go and move on to something that's going to hopefully be more successful.
Yeah, and like we talked about, reuse that for something else. Rewrite stuff inside of it. Turn it into an ink journal, a pen journal, a swatch book. There are a million different ideas that you can do with it. Probably should write that down and make a YouTube video, like other things to do with old notebooks that you're switching out of already. But I think it's just okay. And I get what we say when we say like it's a waste of money. I think we last year we talked about, and I got my first bullet journal. It took me a really long time to be okay with buying one because I think at that point it was maybe like 20 or $25. And I was like, that is so much money for a notebook. Like, I'm just going to write stuff in it. Why does it cost so much money? But I feel like, and this is how I look at fountain pens now too, it's like an investment in yourself because not always, there are things that are overpriced in the planner space, most definitely. But having a notebook that you know is going to hold up. I mean, you were just talking about this too. Like, you cannot write an LT any longer because it's just not it. So you will spend a little bit of extra money to buy yourself a notebook that you know that you're going to like. Also, when you break it down, even if something is $35, you're using this for an entire year. So, like, it does cut down the cost a little bit, especially if that's going to be the thing that makes or breaks it. And I look at the same thing with like fountain pens and different things like this. Yes, you can buy cheap fountain pens. Let me tell you, the Timu ones that I got as a part of my little like Timu trial, they are garbage, trash. They both have stopped working, and I've tried everything to bring them back to life. And I was just like, this is a waste. I'd rather spend the extra money on a pen that I know that I'm going to use, that it looks beautiful and actually friggin' works. But those are the types of things that I just see as like it makes you happy and enjoy doing it, but know that it can change. You know, you don't like the pen you're using, change the pen. There's so many different ones. Steal one from work. I mean, whatever you feel like you need to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. Like, you can make changes to the supplies you're using as well. It doesn't have to be specifically like the notebook or the planner or anything like that, but you can change up the decorative styles you're using. You can change up the pens you're using. Maybe if you find that whiteout isn't for you because you try and write over the top of it and your pen color's not really the same, go and buy some white sticker labels. They work so well. They're my preferred mistake fixing hack. But anyway, just thinking about like the parts of your system that aren't working, do I need to scrap them or do I just need to tweak them? Is there something else that I could do instead that'll bring me more kind of joy and fulfillment in my journaling process? But Mark, what would be your next tip for the Planner Pals in terms of staying consistent?
This one kind of encompasses a little bit of everything that we talked about, but I think that building a strong habit is going to be your best path to success. And everything we've talked about in doing this is all about finding what works for you and exploring that. But I think the most important part of it is just keeping that consistency. It's like, Mark, how do I keep consistent? Be consistent in your usage of what that looks like. I am a firm believer that, again, if I can touch it every single day or I can use it every single day, that I'm going to really build it in and start to use it more. But I know that every single day may not be realistic for everyone. I talk so often about my bullet journal and work, and people write me back and they're like, well, you must not work in education because I don't have the time to even look at anything during the day while I'm teaching. Okay, every few hours isn't right for you, but maybe the morning time is before your first class comes in or before you head home for the evening and you're kind of cleaning up your space and all of that. You take a look through. And even every single day, you mentioned it before, might not be for everyone. You may have something that needs to be looked at once a week. I personally feel this way. I think you were kind of going there too, Jess, is that having it that inconsistent doesn't help build the habit. So maybe you do it every 2 days or every 3 days. I just want to go too long because I feel like the out of sight, out of mind is what's going to get in your way and potentially make you forget that you even have a thing that you're supposed to be using. So really focus in on building those stronger habits and finding things that excite you, and make sure that you feel okay and comfortable in changing them if you need to. Again, building the habit is going to be the most important part of keeping consistent in anything that you're using, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that it really depends on what kind of purpose you've set up for that particular planner or that particular journal. For instance, I have a journal that is a swatch book. I don't need to check in with my swatch book every single day. Like, oh, I wonder what them pens look like. I better go check them colors. No, there's no need. What I will do though is check in with that anytime I want to do a new journal setup or something like that. So it has a very kind of like time and place function associated with it. So consistent, quote, quote, consistent use of that journal is just making sure that if I get a new set of pens, I put them in the swatch book. And that doesn't happen every day, thankfully. Otherwise, my house would be overflowing with pens, Mark. It's already a problem. I don't need to compound that. But there are certain journals in my lineup that a daily touch just is not necessary. Another one, which is a bit more routinized, I suppose, would be my goal planner. My goal planner does not need to be touched every day because it is only used like once a month to pull the actions for my goals into my everyday journal, which funnily enough I do use every day given the fact that it's in the name. So because I'm like siphoning off that information, and yes, I guess it's a duplication, but it's a duplication with purpose, and we talked about that, right? Because I have siphoned that information off into my everyday journal, I don't need to go back and check in with the goal planner every single day, but I do need to check in with it at least once a month to make sure that things are still updated in there. It has a routine, it's just not a daily routine.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You actually just made me feel a bit better about my desk bullet journal. We talked about that one quite a few times last year where I set it up because I really wanted to have that in my life. And then that turned more of like a tracker's journal than anything else. I have the inks that I have from Ferris Wheel Press as a part of their affiliate Jubilee program. So I keep track of those, my social media trackers, things like that. And I felt really bad for a long time of not using that every single day or looking in it. But you honestly just hit me with a bout of knowledge that was like, Mark, that's not the purpose, is to look at that every single day. It's a time and place where you need it, not all the time. I would feel differently about my work journal, obviously, because I do need to. So thank you, Jess. You helped me out on this podcast to accept myself and how I use different journals.
You are so welcome. I think that's just the thing, It's like consistency. If you take consistency just to be daily, then I think a lot of us are setting ourselves up for failure in that respect. Because as I said, there are journals that I consistently use. I am consistent with them. I keep up with them, but I don't touch them every day because it's not what they need. And it's not what I need from them, if that kind of makes sense.
Hopefully other people too have just been like, all of a sudden are like, hallelujah, I feel as if I have been touched by the bullet journal God. Thank you for this forgiveness. Thank you for this permission.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So we want to hear from you, Planner Pals. Let us know from today's topic what's a habit or a tip that you have learned in the past that has helped you stay consistent inside of your bullet journal or planner. You can always drop a note in the comments of the video if you're watching this on YouTube, or of course you can drop a comment if you're watching this on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you might be, and just let us know. And if you're one of the email friends, because we have a number of email friends that we really love that message us because they watch us or listen to us but don't really participate in social media, you can also email us at plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from you there as well.
I'm excited to hear other people's tips because I know that staying consistent with planning and journaling is something that always comes up around this time of year. So make sure to jump into the comments of wherever you're watching and go and snoop on other people's ideas as well, because they have great feedback to give.
I'll tell you, just some of the best places to learn about bullet journaling or really anything you're interested in is the comment section. You and I both know as creators, people love to tell you things.
And I love to hear it. I love to hear from people. I'm not necessarily the greatest at emailing back, but I love to hear about it.
So Jess, next episode, we have a very interesting topic. This is one that I've actually never really spoken about or talked to at length, which is what it's like to be a bullet journal / productivity / stationary creator on the internet.
Yeah, I've only done maybe like one video about it from like the way back whens, and I think that was about like, how I got started or something like that. And I look back on it now, I'm like, oh my god, cringe, disgusting. Let's not watch this. But I'm interested to hear your take on this, obviously, because like you are in such a different situation to like how I'm doing mine and such, and you also have like a different niche. Like I think there's a decent overlap, but there are differences between the stuff we put out. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about that topic.
It's going to be an absolute amazing episode. One that I think for anyone who maybe even thinking about starting up part time, partial time, full time content creator might be a great episode for you. Or if anything, you just get to learn about the history and what we thought was going to happen versus what actually happened. Until next time, Planner Pals, we'll talk to you. See ya.